Hey, I'm Joe. Thanks for coming out. Juan, thank you for co-hosting this with Alpha. So I'm Joe. I run a quarterly kind of get together with people who are interested in entrepreneurship through acquisition. And the way I would put it is that in the last quarter, for people interested in buying businesses, we had an event. It was with an investor, and I looked out at some of my friends who are there. I'm like, this is a very similar looking group of people, and it doesn't need to be. So I asked Juan, hey, can I coordinate with Alpha and co-host an event to talk about what is business buying, so that it's not just this very niche. It doesn't need to be a very niche thing. So I put together a little bit of a presentation to expand hey, what is entrepreneurship through acquisition? Maybe it's interesting to you, maybe it's not, but I'll go through it pretty quick, and then I know Juan will kind of go through some things for Alpha, and then we can get back to meeting one another. And so I guess at the end, I'll kind of skip towards the end. I know right over here, if you know who I am previously and can talk about what is ETA, raise your hands. Okay, so if this is interesting to you, you can of course talk to me, but then there are folks here, and this is why we kind of want to combine the social aspect of this. So you can be like, oh, what Joe is yapping about was interesting. There's a number of people to talk to about this. So a little bit about me first. Very quickly, I was in the Army. What did I do? I tried to raise a search fund to buy a business and raise money to then go look for and acquire business. I was unsuccessful in the capital raise, but I ended up starting my own business after all. So that's me owning a delivery service partner business with Amazon during COVID with my mask, delivering packages to all the packages, just nonstop packages. I went to UNC where I have a friend, Jay. He bought a lake cleaning business in Washington. So it's an ETA acquisition that I invested in. And so I've been part of their board of advisors, watching that company grow and hopefully exit soon. So I've done that. And now I'm kind of marking myself as a business advisor with small businesses. And I know Juan through being a management consultant with Ankara. So just who is this guy talking to me about this thing? That's me. So small business acquisitions, the idea is that you buy a business that already exists and it de-risks a lot of the startup phases of it, which is why it's a really exciting path for people. And I like to compare it to buying a house, because I think a lot of professionals like ourselves, I think a lot of what we see is I have a corporate job and I do this thing and I want to build wealth. And the thing that people equate with wealth, especially in the US, is my house. So if I want to build more wealth, I'll buy another house and I'll do real estate, which is great, which is fine. You can do that. But what I would say is that if you're going to take out a mortgage and you do essentially a leverage buyout of your house, right? I buy a house, I put cash down, I put in debt into it, and then over time the market grows a little bit, whatever it is, you can't control that, but it grows. You pay down your mortgage, and now there's your wealth. It's the equity that you've paid down. You've unlevered that investment. Now, what makes business buying really interesting instead of buying another piece of real estate is that you can grow it. You have the power and control to be I'm going to go to a new market. I'm going to hire 10 more people to sell this business. And then it's not only spitting off cash to you, but it's just also just growing generally. And so I think that's kind of the excitement of the opportunity of entrepreneurship through acquisition, finding a business that exists today that you can buy, is that you can go. Okay, is that you can grow it. And so that is where investors are interested in. That's where a lot of people here who are looking for a business to buy, that's why they're interested in it, is that it is a career path. You can stop doing whatever you're doing now, be your own boss, grow a business and have that control. And it's also the wealth generation of growing a business that has the fundamentals, the proven fundamentals, and has existed for 10, 30 years. And now you're I'm just going to take it to the next level. And I'm going to pocket all that cash and sell it later, or give it to my kids. Whatever it's yours, so you can do whatever you want with it, right? That's the beauty of it. So, there is buy versus build. And so these are some of the pros and cons of buying a business versus building it on your own. Now, if you have heard of this before, but you haven't been involved in it a lot, there are a lot of myths in this. And this is why I've kind of called this presentation an honest look at it. So There are people who are like, buy a business and you can get a laundromat and it'll just spit off money for you and you don't have to do anything. And the number of conversations that I've had where it's like, I'm going to buy a nail salon and I'm going to hire a GM and then I'm going to make 40 grand of passive income. And it's like, I'm sorry, sir, you are a like 50-year-old man that doesn't know anything about a nail salon. Like it's not going to spit off 40 grand for you. And also it's not going to be passive. Like this is a path that is a lot of hard work. You know, you saw me from when I owned my business, I'm delivering packages. It's hot, it's physical labor, it's calling people. Like in corporate jobs, you're tackling interesting, sophisticated problems in small business ownership. It's like, why aren't you here? I don't care that it's raining and you're sad. Like, I need you to come to work because otherwise that's like $200 out of like this business's pocket today. Like, it's not sexy or glamorous, but it is yours. And so it is a lot of hard work. So it's a path that you can pursue, but it is hard. It's not passive. Don't be fooled by by that. At least that would be Joe's personal argument. The other thing that I have is, the next two things is that it's a lot of times will be advertised as not risky. Like it's a proven business. You don't have to like take all these risks of the startup phase. That is true. It de-risks that, but people do go bankrupt. So like you take out a mortgage on your house and you have a job. You pay that mortgage with the money that comes in from your job all the time. You take out an SBA loan for a business and that business loses a key customer and you can't make the payments, you're going to default on that. Like there are people, and I can introduce you to some that like have bankrupted from buying a business that didn't work out for them. Now, I could probably also point you to Asurion down the street, which was a search fund acquisition that was originally like tow trucks or like, yeah. And then they had like a little like insurance business on the side that they then turned into cell phone breaking insurance. And now it's Asurion down the street. And it's like for investors, like, I don't know. It was a very high number X return for their money, right? So, yeah. There you go. Yeah. So the upside is there too. So, you know, you have to be careful, but I don't want to lie to you because like that's a sure-proof way to make money. Then, yes. What is ETA? It is entrepreneurship through acquisition. I did a very bad job of this presentation. I didn't even explain what the acronym was. But no. It's a great question. I talk fast. I'm excited. The last myth that I would caution people on, because like if you look it up online tonight, you're going to find a lot of things that are like, it's so great. The last thing is silver tsunami. I have a question mark by this. There's a lot of things of like the baby boomers are retiring and there's like billions, trillions of wealth being transferred to who, right? It could be people here who want to buy a business. Now, a lot of those businesses aren't sellable. A lot of those businesses don't make sense in the 21st century. You know, they're too small to be bought. I don't know if the silver tsunami is real. I think some of the numbers are like a little inflated in terms of like the market opportunity compared to the past. But there is a little bit of that. How big that like opportunity is, I don't know. I think it's a little less than what's being sold as like the trillions, but I don't know. Jared is like shaking his head at me.
I got way too many friends who already capitalized on that wave.
Yeah. And so that's another thing is like, when is this wave going to hit maybe?
I feel like it's already started.
Yeah, started.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people lost their parents during COVID.
Yeah.
They got that really good soon. And
Yeah.
you're seeing kids who have way too much money take mom and dad's money, put it into crypto early, and they double down on that. So
Yeah.
it's like, well, that's crazy.
Yeah. So it is something that's happening. I would say, is it more than in the past? Yes, just by the demographics, but you know, how much of that is actual viable opportunity, I think can be overstated. That would be my question mark for you on that. But the path to do this, there's varied. So there are search funds that are like the traditional model where you raise money from investors and then you live off of that and then you find something to buy. And then there's self-funded. So that's the simple bifurcation of this model. I think a lot of us here, I don't see any of my traditional search fund folks here today. So I think most people would probably be categorized as self-funded, of mostly looking for something to buy using their own money. And then maybe if you find something, then you can raise capital from investors. You can get an SBA loan for it. So there then are options to finance it. There are accelerator models. There's a whole bunch more of nuance besides this. So this is just kind of the simple way. And then the figure below is from the Stanford primer on this topic, which is kind of like the generic steps of how this works. Of like, you raise money, you look for something, you buy something, you grow something, you exit something. The next one you can also take a photo of. So this is the last thing that I have for you is if you are interested in this topic, you can talk to other people here who are familiar with it, interested in it, know more about it. You can send me an email. I'm happy to send you any information that you'd like. And then these are some of like publications and books and websites that you can go to learn more about the topic. So that's all I had. Thank you all for coming out and just learning a little bit about it. And you can, yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, quick question. Can we
Yeah.
go around the horn, like introduction, and to see who's buying, who's selling, things like that, and where everybody is?
Yeah, just so for the people who are like familiar with like ETA of like what's going on. Yeah. I usually.
Introductions. I mean, you can frame it wherever you want to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, we got
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. We can do it at the end.
Yeah. Why don't we keep it simple and who here, I guess, for like kind of in the entrepreneurship through acquisition space is like looking for a business to buy. It's like, yeah. Who here is maybe like a service provider, capital provider, something like that. Yeah. So you got some people here who are looking, who are like waiting for someone else to find something so that they can fund it. Yeah.
Here is being introduced to this topic for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good,
That's
actually.
good.
Yeah.
That's good. That's,
Yeah.
That's a good path. Knowledge is a great path to go on.
Yeah. Oh, I would be really remiss if I didn't say, because this is with Alpha, there are a lot of Spanish-speaking business owners in town that are widely in the market passed over for business buyers because business buyers often don't speak Spanish. And they're sending a lot of the business buyers in this space, like they don't speak Spanish. And there's a lot of like Spanish-speaking owners who are going to Bank of America in Nolensville with like giant wads of cash from their business and no one's reaching out to them. I remember I talked to him, his name's Kevin Barona. He's out of Miami, and his whole thesis is like, I'm going to corner the market on Spanish-speaking businesses up for sale in Miami because no one's really fundraising for this, and then going out to all these like businesses throwing off just cash like there's no tomorrow. And he's done well for himself there. And so I also think that's an opportunity if like if you can speak Spanish and like talk to business owners, like that's a huge opportunity and niche that is under tapped right now.
Tied to that topic.
Yeah.
The latest numbers, I think the Latino community GDP for the U.S. is $4.3 trillion. Which if the Latino community were a country, would be the 5th largest economy in the world.
Yeah.
So you have this huge market with cash, with people to buy things that sometimes we forget about it, because we just forget about it, but it's this huge market that, and again, Latino comes in every shape, form, and accent and languages. So
Yeah.
it's this big market that you can tap both for funding, businesses, clients, and all these things.
Yeah.
22 billion in Middle Tennessee alone, the 12th largest buying power in the state in America.
He knows his numbers. I like
Yeah.
I used to work for Telemundo, so
But yeah, that's all I had. Juan, is there anything? Any questions? Yeah.
How would you compare ETA versus like buying a franchise? Not the same or?
It is similar, I would say, in that it de-risks a lot of the process, right? A franchise is a business in a box in a lot of ways. And I think when you think about starting up a business, you have to consider like, how much dumb tax are you going to spend? Like, I'm going to do this marketing of radio ads because I think my customers are there, and then you spend $5,000 and like you get nothing out of it, right? That's you paying a dumb tax in a startup. Versus a franchise out of a box will be like, you do this marketing, I'm going to help you buy the right retail spot, like do this branding. And so you spend like 8% royalty for every dollar of revenue, which is expensive, but you avoid paying that dump tax. And in a lot of ways, you can be like, this will at least make this amount of money. And so it's similar in the sense that there is something established about what you're buying into. So yeah.
I was just going to comment on that. I know I'm not one of the speakers, but to his point though too, I think it's also about personality. So if you're the person who likes to create and innovate, you're not going to be happy with a franchise because you don't get to do that. But if you're a person who is like, give me the instruction manual and I just want to follow it,
Yeah.
it's a really great option.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's say I want to fragment my business, right? I own different properties, I own different technologies, and I have like a great virtual assistant team. But I don't want to sell the entirety of my business. How would I break up one of those products or assets into being a business, and could I sell it through this model? Like, how would that potentially?
Yeah, I mean, that's not my area of expertise. However, I mean, that does happen. I was actually talking about a business that's kind of being spun out of something already. I think what it comes down to is you carve that out, and it's also what pieces are you going to carve out with it. And so like you're going to look at that revenue stream and the cash flow from just that component, but then other parts of the valuation will have to be considered of like what management is coming from it and like what other pieces. So that's like, I would say a little bit more complex to value, but you do see that. And I see, especially like in like the silver tsunami paradigm of like business owners, I think what I see more often is not necessarily like I had this like corporate empire that's really complex versus I own 7 businesses and they each have their own thing in different places. And then I'm going to sell this one. And then there's like cross connection of some of the IP that they personally own. And so then that's kind of a tangled web. But in this space, what I see more often is that's related to that is like, I'm just a serial entrepreneur and I like am really smart. The one that I'm thinking of now is someone who really does a lot of lubricating oils. And like they just invent like all these different oils and mixes of these different things. And he's set up like 5 different businesses for it. And he's like, my son runs this one, and then I invented these 3 other things, and like this is this business. So I'm going to sell this business. I'm going to kick my son out of that business, and I'm going to let my friend buy this other thing from me. So that's what I see more often.
So
Yeah.
I'll just jump in. So I put an offering recently on a company. There was a guy who owned, I guess we can call it 3 separate businesses, and he'd owned them for 20 years. He's looking to retire. So he actually broke them out from being one company, made 3 LLCs, ran them for 3 years so that like guys like Matt are okay with like, you know, the financials on it to say that they're individual. I do some shared services on like accounting, stuff like that. But basically you're able to add that back in. But he kept them as separate LLCs so that it was very clear what you were buying. And then some people do try and sell off like a plant or something like that they're divesting from. I think that gets so much more complicated from like ETA, like individual kind of search of thing. But he was very big on this guy gave me the best advice ever. Make separate LLCs, run them separately, and then you can sell them separately. And his plan is to like slowly sell off each one as you hit near retirement. And he's looking at one here that's like, it's a pain in the butt. He lives far away. He has to come up here once a month. So he's selling this one first. He's gonna hold on to the other one. So like he was very clear on 2 LLCs, 3 years of data behind it. It becomes a lot easier to sell to banks and everyone else.
It was a retirement account.
Yeah.
So I'm an SBA lender, and I actually have one right now that I'm working on that this lady is buying a division of a company.
Yeah.
And so it can be done. You end up, in this particular case, it's a division of a larger company, so all of it rolls up to one tax return, so we can't actually underwrite off of that one tax return. We're underwriting off of like internal.
Yeah, in my perspective, it's all about the legal structure and the accounting structure. If you get those 2 things right, then it's not whatever you want. As long as you're doing intercompany transfers and all that correctly, then.
Yeah, in my past life, I worked for an IT company that essentially the owner, every single idea he had, he opened an LLC. It was a nightmare. Because he had like 20 LLCs, but we were club corporation, but he sold a bunch of them, and some of them was just because he had the idea, he had the knowledge. Some of them were not even like operational because they will just sell like
Yep, that's how our firm
everything separate.
That's why I asked the question. We work for an IT firm, and most of it's just the IP and the code. The rest of the company don't even matter.
Yeah, and he was smart because he had like his IP. Like there was like this underneath system that like, kind of power all of his different ideas. He personally holded the IP on that one. So every time he sells something, you'll have 2 or 3 years that you still have to pay
Yes.
because you have to use his system.
Smart.
And if anyone knows people who are really good at valuing IP, start inviting them, 'cause that's a really good skill to have. Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, we're going through the house buying process right now, and there are things like, first down payment assistance grants, right? So, like what I would love to do in an ideal world, and I think a lot of people can do this. People who have a lot of money, I guess, do this as a saving hack. Is like, don't use your own personal money, but like use other people's money, right? So, like, in the small bit, like in this space, are there SBA, which SBA is Small Business Administration?
Yes.
Okay, great. Are there SBA loans? I guess how much capital on hand does someone have to come into, or does it vary?
It varies. So when you're buying a company, the SBA says you have to have a 10% equity injection. That's the terminology they use. So most people are like, what does that even mean? What is equity injection? Typically it's down payment, but you can use a seller note or seller financing for a portion or sometimes all of that. Generally though, when you think about banks, right, we're pretty conservative, even in SBA space. So we want you to have some skin in the game. So typically, it's not uncommon for us to say, look, we want you to put 5% cash down payment, take a seller note for the other 5%, and then we finance the rest. And so that is an option. There's certain rules and terms that seller note has to be on in order to count as equity. In other words, the SBA wants it to feel more like equity and less like debt. And there's ways they do that, but that's absolutely doable. And now we can actually do partial acquisitions with SBA too. So if you're like, hey, I'm going to buy 85% of this company, and the seller's going to keep 15%, and does a couple of things. It reduces the purchase price. It keeps the seller in the business long term, as long as they want to be in it. And so if they have a special certification or license or whatever, like that you need to rely on, or if a lot of sellers are like, I don't want to own a business, but I just want to be a veterinarian. I don't want to own a vet practice, right? I'm working on one of those right now. Well, let them retain some level of ownership, and you buy a portion of the company, and that's a way to do it.
Yeah. I can recommend some attorneys you can use as well. What kind of started like this whole explosion of like business acquisition as like something you can do is not that this is a new idea, right? Like I think the like pizzeria in Pompeii that like was frozen in time, that was probably like someone's son didn't want to buy it, so he sold it to someone else, right? We've been buying businesses as long as there have been businesses. What's been innovative in the last 20 to 30 years has been like the financing mechanism through which you can do it. In particular, it's been you can raise capital from investors and then they will have the right of first refusal to buy into it. And so what you've seen is that like some people graduating from MBA programs where this started, they essentially would put in little to no money of their own into it. They would fundraise, but through finding a business, they would start with like 8% of common equity, and the rest would be financed from investors, bank debt, and it's the seller financing some of it as well. And then through sweat equity, then investing more and more. So there's like the full range of like how you can finance an acquisition from some people do just have the cash to be like, I will just give you this $1 million and you give me this business, to situations where it's like I'm going to put in a lot of my cash and that's enough skin in the game to get Matt to write an SBA loan for me for the rest of it. And there's also been cases where someone has a really personal relationship with the seller and they've developed that over time. They just know them. And in some ways that seller like gifts them the business and says like, give me like a little bit of cash up front. I'm going to finance the rest of it and you're going to keep paying me over the next 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, that's rare. It's everyone's kind of dream to just be like given a business and then like pay a little whatever. But yeah, so I think the financing mechanism is really what's new in this space. That's like renewed interest, and now like a lot of people are talking about it. Business buying is old. The different ways to finance it, that's kind of what's a little bit new.
Yeah, outside investors are also available too. So like there's like a site main share, but there's a lot, right? You might have someone in your network who can invest. Or I know a guy who bought a company out in North Carolina, $5 million company. He had 50 grand in it, raised, I think up to 100 grand or something like that. And
you're looking at me like I know what business is.
I know. But anyways, he didn't know any of the people that were equity investors at all. He didn't know any of them. He put it through Main Shares, which is a site, and he was pretty convincing. He was very good at talking and making slides. So he was very good. So he raised, it might have been a couple $100 grand by the end of the day. And anyways, he was able to buy a company using that. Pretty little
I want to turn this over to Juan. So I want to kind of wrap this up because there's plenty of conversation we could talk. I could talk about this all night. I want to make sure we kind of get to the rest of it. I think the way I would close this out is when we're talking about like how do you finance buying it, the rule of thumb from investors is generally if you find a good business, you can get it funded. The trick is how do you find a good business? How do you make sure it's good? How do you make sure it's good for you, right? Like I turned down doing a franchise because I was like, I don't think I could be excited about this. Like the fundamentals were all there. I was like, I just don't care. So that wouldn't be right for me. But so that's kind of the trick to it. There's a lot of, things to talk about and like ways to do it, which is really exciting. I'm glad for all your questions. But I do want to give it back to Juan. So thank you.